And we are joined by State Senator Curt Voight from the Rapid City area. And I have everybody do this in the beginning because I feel like districts can be really hard to map out for people. So could you explain your district before we get into everything?
I would like to be able to explain that, Blake. It's I call it the horseshoe. It starts down on the southeast side. It runs out up on 79, jumps across Corral Drive, out to Sheridan Lake Road, out to 385, north 385 to hit Nemo Road, come back in on Nemo Road in Rapid City.
Okay. So you got a lot of scenery.
And then I have 2 precincts in Black Hawk and 1 in Somerset. So it basically horseshoes around intercity Rapid.
Interesting. So I want to start right here. You came out, and it's pretty early right now, if you think about it, in the gubernatorial election to be endorsing a candidate. But you have come forward and you have endorsed Toby Doden for governor. What led you to make that decision?
Basically, without looking into it, where I made the decision, there were 2 things. One is he is South Dakotan, born and raised in the Aberdeen area, in Groton, and he's always been in South Dakota. And he is a grassroots businessman. Started with nothing, and he's where he is today. And so I would say he's learned the hard knocks of the business, where you establish yourself and get the credibility in the community that you need so you're viable. The other thing is his political core. I don't like to use the word conservative, but I align basically in terms of our national leadership with Trump, and he says he basically, again, isn't in lockstep with the president, but a lot of things that the president stands for, I guess I support. And so that's where I'm at initially, and then I just looked at who is out there, who has indicated they're going to.
And there aren't many right now. Right now there's, I believe it's Doden and
John.
Yeah, Speaker of the House John Hanson, Carla Lems. But there are a lot of potential candidates as well that we've heard. So I'm wondering.
Well, you're a potential.
No, not me. Believe you me. I don't think I could win city council of an acre of grasslands out in the middle of nowhere. But what I'm curious about is if this was a tough decision for you, given the fact that there are still horizon candidates they have yet to announce, and I'm sure you have a relationship with a lot of people. South Dakota is a state, but it's almost like county in the way that the population works.
It's a state, but it is a unique state in that geographically we're cut down the middle, and there's 2 different mentalities. I was born and raised in the eastern part of the state, so the homestead back there, and then there's the west side of the state. The eastern side of the state is, neighbors are Minnesota and Iowa, and our neighbors are Wyoming and Colorado, and it's just a different mentality, a different perspective in terms of your foundation.
I hope you forgive me for this, but I'm just going to tell you, I am from California, which is a much different place. My grandma's from Rapid City, so I think I have like a little bit of forgiveness here, but otherwise, I was born and raised in California, and one of the fascinating things about South Dakota is that because you have 1 million people, when I say the state's almost like a county, it's that it's one big community. It's not California. If you're in LA and you look at like San Francisco, they're so disconnected really, but South Dakota is all connected. So I wonder for somebody like you, if it was hard to make that decision and to make it so early, given that you probably have a pretty close relationship with other candidates or potential candidates.
I think professionally, as per legislator, I know all the other candidates. I know Attorney General, I know Governor Roden, I know all those people. The other piece was, I think sometimes being a part of an organization hamstrings you in terms of knowing too many people. And I don't think that's the case with Toby. He's an outsider looking in and says he's going to change some things. And again, that's kind of the perspective at the federal level now. Some things are going to change. Some things need to change. The old thing about tinkering hasn't gotten it done. And people are at a point, and that's probably why I ended up where I'm at, the opportunity I have in terms of not being in a legislature, not being involved politically, but saying, I think that we need to make some significant changes in terms of how we treat those that put us there.
What kind of changes do you want to see made at the executive level here in the state? What kind of changes are you hoping he brings?
Well, I think if you're talking about executive level, you're talking about as the legislature.
Well, since we're talking about the gubernatorial,
okay.
we're talking about the governor's office. I'm just curious.
In terms of leadership.
Yeah, in terms of leadership, what kind of changes would you like to see?
Well, I would hope, my perspective is I need something sound that I can bite into, i.e. property taxes. What are you going to do about property taxes? And take it personally. What are you going to do about property taxes? It's been an issue, and now it's at the point, it's a huge issue with the state, and people have had enough, and they want to know, so what are you going to do about it? And Doden has indicated, he has a perspective in terms of what's going to be done. He's going to eliminate it, and his perspective is it's going to be what I call a use tax, a receipt tax on everything. And one of his perspectives is one of our biggest revenue sources in the state, other than ag, especially West River on the west side, is the tourism in terms of, there's been talk about bed and booze and all that type of stuff and sorting that out. Are you a resident, aren't you a resident? He's just saying, we'll just do a receipt tax. Doesn't matter if you're buying milk or you're buying whatever.
In other words, a sales
beverage.
Tax. A sales tax, yeah.
Not a sale, a use tax, The sales tax, there's exemptions all over the place.
So what is the difference, actually, between a receipt tax, what he's proposing, in a sales tax? Sorry, I thought we were talking about the same thing here.
Yeah. No, a sales tax, there are exemptions, certain exemptions in terms of items that are not taxable as per if you're a nonprofit, if you're whatever. We have exemptions. People are exempted from that. And in terms of this, if you get a sales receipt, there's going to be a portion of that receipt that goes to state funding, basically, to take care of public education, a lot of the issues with public education.
You bring up property taxes. That's something that we've heard from. It's something that we covered this last legislative session. And as you know, the governor got his bill through. There was a lot of legislation thrown at it. A lot of it didn't really go anywhere. We'll start here. What do you hope we'll start with the study, because the study's happening right now. They just had their first meeting, I believe, was yesterday, correct?
Yep, started yesterday.
So what do you hope the group accomplishes?
Well, I hope that group, if we're going to do something with sales tax, where are you going to provide the revenue stream to cover that? And that's one of my concerns. I don't know that will get done, but there's another side to that. I think that there needs to be immediate relief for an entity in our state that has really gotten hammered hard, that cannot afford it, and that's those that are on a fixed income. And I submitted a bill that got sent to appropriation. Part of it was slid over into the governor's, but it wasn't to the extent or degree that I said for immediate. And basically, it's what I call a 65-20-10. 65 years old, been a resident in the state for 10 years, and have resided in your current home for 10 consecutive years. If those things are true, your property taxes on that home are rolled back to what they were in 2020, and they are froze there as long as you reside in that residence. And the whole thinking about that is, as long as you reside in that residence, that is not going to change. What that means, you're on a fixed income. If you're on retirement, pension, whatever, now you know what you're going to need to be able to continue in that residence, and that just hasn't been true. I don't know if they're going to address the whole thing, but at least give that relief right away.
What happened when you released that? Every bill here gets a hearing, so I'm sure yours.
Well, mine didn't get a hearing. They sent it to appropriations because they said the governor's going to come up with something like that. So they sent it to appropriations, and that's where it laid.
Mm-hmm. What did you make of the governor's bill?
I thought it was too soft. Didn't go far enough for relief. Just didn't go far enough. It doesn't go far enough for relief, to really relieve those that are getting hammered. The ones that are really getting hammered, one side of that bill was that, again, people in Rapid City, Sioux Falls area, in the residents are really getting hammered. Somebody will come from out of state with significant cash in terms of what they sold in California compared to what they can buy here, and still have some left over for investment. They'll come in and they've inflated our evaluations.
What are you hearing from your constituents right now on property taxes? I'm sure you get a lot of feedback about this, especially your district, some of the places you're naming.
They want relief. They're just saying we cannot afford to live in our home the way it is now, and those property taxes keep jumping. We are being taxed out of our home, out of our residence that we worked all our life for, retirement. And basically, they've got two choices. They can sell that home, take capital gains, move into what I call chicken coops, and make an investment.
Have you seen us millennials? We're all in the chicken coops. We were
That's
joking on another episode.
Yeah.
We said we are like hamsters. You could put like a giant water bottle in
and
the
they're
windows
building
of
more,
our apartments.
they're building more of them. And I'm saying, I'm selfish there. I'm saying these people have invested their fortunes and their lives in this state, and we shouldn't be forcing them to. But the other choice is to go work for a box store for $15 an hour to pay your property taxes, and you're 65 or 70 years old.
Are you hearing a lot of people that are taking those jobs?
Oh yeah, that's kind of what got me on the trail. I was going through box stores, whether it's groceries or whatever, you know. And so I started asking those that are taking care of me when I check out. I would look at them physically and they'd say, you look old, and I say, you look as old as I do. Anyway, the conversation would be, I'm going, how long you work here? Oh, a year, 2 years. I'm going, so what's the deal? And they just simply blurted out, we can't pay our property taxes. Had to go to work. We had to go back to work to pay those property taxes.
And you're saying this inspired you to, because this was your freshman year in the legislature. You're saying this actually inspired you to get into politics as you start going to these big box stores and you start realizing the people checking you out are elderly people and they're taking these jobs. They're seniors and they're taking these jobs just to pay their property taxes. And that's what they're telling you?
Yep. We couldn't afford to continue to pay our property taxes because they just kept going up and up. It was a case where there wasn't a rollback. There wasn't, like I said, my bill said back to 2020, basically before all this hit. Freeze it there, and it stays there. It's not a free ride. It stays there as long as they reside there. Now, if they move, then that property evaluation goes what it is currently, and the new owner has to pay that tax. What it does is it protects those that live around that neighborhood. If they qualify, then they're not impacted by somebody who moves in and instead of paying $700,000, pays $1.5 million, and then your property tax is almost double.
I want to go back a little bit here. The governor did have another proposal, and I believe, and I'd have to check from the meeting yesterday, and full disclosure, we're taping this today. This airs Monday, and we're taping this Wednesday, the Wednesday before, for those who are watching. But one of he did propose localized sales tax. To offset property taxes. What do you make of that proposal? One of his selling points on it is that, hey, these counties have been hit really hard. At least, you know, this is a more of a localized solution for a localized problem.
Yeah, that, from an ag perspective, that can really be a difficult situation because there's a difference between buying a car and paying sales tax on that and buying a combine or a huge tractor that's $800,000. The sales tax on that is you'll get, I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of his mentality. It's an inequity. It is an inequity. You've got to be.
Would you like to see a carve out then for ag?
Yeah.
Like if it's sales tax, but we exempt ag from this?
Right now, ag is carved out for, they have an ag.
I'm talking about on the sales tax though, because you're talking about buying a combine or something like that. So what I'm curious about is if you would like to see some sort of amendment to where ag purchases wouldn't be affected by this.
And the question is, if you make an exception for ag, why can't you make an exception for businessmen that are businesses in this town that are into, I'm not going to say business, but equipment, big equipment, semis, loaders. I mean, those things are expensive too. So now you need an exemption there. And so my concern is once you open that door, then there's that train behind it, behind that crack, and it just keeps hammering. And basically, that's the game in terms of property tax exemptions. Exemptions here, exemptions there, and I'm saying we need to stop that stuff where we've given all those exceptions or considerations, not just necessarily to ag people or to nonprofits or to those that are, commonly you think of police services, medical services. You start.
Did you Did you vote in support of Amber Hulse's bill, Senator Hulse's bill, Senate Bill 191?
I think I did,
This
yes.
one would have rolled back the valuations, and then it would have capped them going forward and retroactively kind of fit them to that.
Yeah. It was jumping a certain percent every year. There was a cap
After the first rollback, yeah. So kind of rolling back, then it would cap them going forward. What did you make of that bill? That one got pretty close at the end there. It got unanimous. Actually, you know what? I know it got unanimous support now that I think about it in the Senate, and then it failed in the House.
And I voted for it just because of that piece there. Rolled it back. Yeah, to me, it doesn't make any sense to go where you've been now, where people have just been hammered so hard, they don't have any resources anymore. So she rolled it back, and I don't take any credit for that, but that was the same mindset that I had, rolling it back to 2020, except mine was I identified the population that qualified for that. Not everybody, just those.
For seniors, as you said, that have been longtime residents. I want to switch gears here a little bit. What do you think the legislature's not focusing on right now that is an issue in South Dakota that needs more attention? This last session, I know this was your first session, but I'm curious if you thought there was a ball missed, something that kind of avoided the limelight.
There's a ball there right now. You're either going to have to take a swing and hit it, or it's going to continue being a real issue. And we talk about property taxes. The biggest place where a lot of that property money goes is education. And I think that's a real issue, and basically legislature didn't do anything about it because it is a tough issue. I tell people that 20 years ago, when I was still involved in education, to this point, every year, those entities that represent education, especially K-12 and higher ed too, go to the legislature and ask for something every year. More money. In the meantime, what the public sees in terms of the results of that more money is students that are not doing well. So the exit that you're looking at in terms of student competencies have dropped while we continue to throw more money at it. To me, what that says, there's something wrong with the system. The system is not functioning.
And you are on the education committee.
I am on.
We spoke. Actually, I think the last time I put you into one of my stories, the last time you were a face for about 10 seconds on the TV, we were doing a story about the possible, this would have been the breakdown of the Department of Education.
Yep.
I believe
at the federal level.
At the federal level, yeah, we got your reaction to that on the state level. So as somebody who sits on the education committee, what do you fundamentally see as the problem with the system right now?
Yeah. Well, the problem with the system is expensive. It's expensive for the taxpayers, and they're not seeing a product that they would think is a result of that commitment. Multiple states have been in the same issue, and I am going to be attending the Education Commission of the States in Salt Lake here within a month. And I'm going to look at what other states are doing to address that. Are they totally dumping it? My thought is we need to focus. We get tied up in education and legislation in terms of the vehicles, whether it's homeschool funding, parochial school funding, public school funding, homeschool funding, who gets a piece, how much we get. So it's just a constant battle, picking and choosing. I'm saying we need to quit that. You need to stop that. You need to put it back on the parents, and this is the way you do it. You do tax credits, and the parent makes a decision where their kid's going to go to school. And then you look at the results. Every student at some point during the year is checked in terms of their skill levels. And you look at that and say, as a parent, I think the Rapid City Public Schools are doing a great job. And that's where I'm going to put my kids. And that's their decision. But they make that decision. What that does is it relieves a lot of pressure in terms of the legislature, because now we're not in the game of picking and choosing. And I don't like picking and choosing. I used to tell my staff, for staffing, I'm saying, we need to understand something. We as me too. God didn't make, these kids are not junk. We don't treat them as junk. We don't segregate them. We don't pick and choose. We don't care what neighborhood they're from. No. And that's what you're doing in the legislature with money. We're picking and choosing, Somebody gets a scholarship in terms of parochial schools, somebody gets a voucher in terms of homeschoolers, and just picking, and in the public schools are hammering about the formula, and it's just, and I'm going, knock all of that off. We don't care what the vehicle is, we care what the product is. You decide what the vehicle is going to be, and then you'll be accountable for it. If it doesn't work, we're going to come to you and say, you know, the taxpayers of this state are contributing $10,000 for you to make a decision in terms of how your student will get their education. It's not working, you need to make a change.
So I want to go now onto the federal level on a couple of items here, but we'll start with President Trump. You say that you're a strong supporter of President Trump.
I said I'm a supporter.
Okay, a supporter. Okay, well that'll
You've got to be careful.
Okay, not a strong supporter, a supporter.
I'm a solid supporter. Yeah, I like what he does. I like what he says, and then I like what happens, because then you know what's probably going to happen, because there's going to be some angst about some of the things that are going on, but there's going to be results.
So far in his administration, I'm curious what you think the biggest wins are, and if there's anything that you say, you know, maybe he had some room for improvement there.
I think the biggest win was the border. I think that was just a tragedy, and we're still going to see the results of that tragedy for probably several years to get that cleaned up. That just was not necessary, and it was just a terrible tragedy for those that were involved in it, the human life and what happened down there. And as a result, you know, now we got to do some serious cleanup there. And I think the other thing that I was encouraged about, he said, you know, lip service, you need to get votes. I'm shutting that border down. And within, what, 6 months now, it's shut down. And we're going the other direction. We're putting those people that probably shouldn't be here back to where they came from, and they can apply and use the process that we've had for 100 and some years in terms of immigration.
Are there any question marks you have on any of the moves that he's made that right now you're saying, you know, maybe we need to look at this?
Well, make America great again, to me that's really vague, and you've got to give some quarter, I guess, in terms of timeline. I have issues, personal and professional concerns about the Black Hills and the beauty of the hills. And I think the hills are really at risk in terms of a tragedy, a natural tragedy, i.e. specifically fire. The hills have not been taken care of, and most of those hills are federal. And I was just at the governor's egg meeting last week.
Where we set this up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's where we ran into each other, up in Deadwood.
Anyway, so part of that was they had the people in there from Forest Service, federal, in terms of, you know, what's going to be done in terms of getting that turned around. I mean, basically the forests have been abandoned. I always tell people, I was an old math teacher, we're at the origin at one end is positive, one end is negative, and we just went two extremes. We went extremes where we clear-cut everything, abused it, and we had erosion and that problem, to the other part where we can't do anything, and it's been neglected. And now we've got serious issues, and somehow we've got to have accountability and come to the middle and be reasonable in terms of managing that piece of beautiful property out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm really concerned. I'm an assistant chief at a volunteer fire department, and I'll tell you what, when they get going in these hills that have too much fuel to try to control that, you get something started down in Hot Springs with a 50-mile-an-hour wind, 10% humidity, it's going to stop up in Spearfish.
So you're saying you like to see more resources, more attention to
more attention. Just basically opening it up. Right now we currently have one sawmill in the hills. One. And they're saying they can't get the timber. They've had to have somebody come out from Oregon here to cut a timber lease so they can get timber to run the sawmill.
Was it brought up? I know the president had put out in his EO, he had an EO on timber to increase production. Have there been any developments to your knowledge after that announcement was made?
Well, I don't know. That's, you know, to me, it's a wait and see. It's a wait and see. I'm optimistic, at least it's got on his itinerary. He's aware of it. He's aware of it. I mean, it's too late in the Rocky Mountains, I mean, they basically lost it all. And there's two reasons you can lose it. One is you can lose it from fire, and the other reason you can lose it from bugs. But the bug is still an issue of mismanagement. If you manage that forest properly, bugs will be present, but they won't be attacking trees that are at risk because they don't have enough moisture. It's overpopulated, too many trees, and then they just...
So you say you were actually out on some of these wildfires?
Yes.
And what did you, I mean, can you describe what the level of intensity, because you're describing a pretty intense situation when they get going, so.
Well, we had a fire, and I apologize, I can't remember the name, started just south of town a couple of years ago and went up on the ridge over there. It took us about 3 days to get it out. The point is, after the fire was out, we were going and doing cleanup. And the floor of that forest, which basically is limestone or granite, was so hot you could hardly walk on it yet after days, because the roots are still burning, the needles are burning. That floor was full of fuel, and it just took forever to get that out of there. We were up there days, scraping, scratching, trying to prevent a wind coming up and picking up something and starting it all over again. It's hot. Or I've seen a situation, we were on a wild land out north of Wall, about 30 miles north, up there along the Cheyenne River. 3 times that thing got away. It would come roaring up out of those breaks, throwing those things up in the air and landing out there half a mile away and
the
starting
ember throw,
up. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to handle that when the weather conditions are just very, very challenging.
Well, I will give you the final floor here to whatever you want to finish this interview.
Oh, okay.
We'll give you the final word here.
I think there's some things out there in this community, West River, that people may not be aware of. One of them is our entity that provides power to us, Black Hills Energy, is going to put another huge substation in. And as somebody indicated, across from Fleet Farm now, they have approved you just mentioned in the news.
They didn't approve, but they've proposed a site for the prison.
For the prison.
For the prison.
Or another prison.
We're still trying to, at this point in time, we have another reporter on the story today. We're still trying to figure out the scope of that. Just so we're, very transparent here. This is Wednesday afternoon. We may even have more information by the time this airs, but I'm listening.
And the other third thing for me is it's not on the horizon yet, but water.
And there is that proposal. I know it got through the legislature. They're now going to be, I believe, right, looking into bringing it from the Missouri out west.
In a pipeline. The challenge with that, people know about Webb water because you heard about that back east, and most people don't know what Webb stands for. It stands for Walworth, Edmonds, and Brown. Those are the 3 counties originally that started that process that they use. The challenge out here, back east, they take it out of the river and it goes downhill all the way for all those different sites. Here, when you pump it out of the river, you got to pump it uphill for 150 miles. And I'll tell you what, the resources that it's going to take to be able to do that is huge, and it's going to have to be a federal project.
And that did pass the legislature, if I'm correct, right? The study to look into the feasibility. And I know it's very preemptive at this point. I mean, there's really nothing.
Well, my thought with that, and I've just started initial conversations, it's going to have to be federal money. And I'm saying, at one time in the state, there was a federal project regarding water, and most people have forgotten about it. It was part of the Pick Sloan project, and part of that was called Oahe. And Oahe was put in for 3 reasons: flood control down the river from Missouri, power, which generates a lot, and we ship a lot of it out of state because we've got so much. And the third was do irrigation in the eastern part of the state in the Jim River Valley. It was really flat, fertile land. They got the first 2 done, and they started the third one, and the current president at that time got in trouble and had to make significant cuts, and they axed that and never finished it. So I'm saying we need to lay a guilt trip on them. That isn't right, but we need to bring it to their attention. You never finish that back east, and we have a great need out west now for water to tie the federal government back into that whole process. I've been told by engineers that we currently use 1/10 of 1% of the water going down the river. there's been contacts, Colorado, Denver area, they're running out of water. The Colorado River is dry because it all goes for irrigation to California and Nevada. They can't get their water back. They don't have any water. They're thinking about trying to get water out of the Missouri River because we're not using it. The old thing about if you don't use it, you lose it. And to me, that's...
Right, I hear you. And that is certainly something that I do agree will be a critical thing looking forward is water out here. Especially the community is growing.
Oh, yeah.
So the demand we have right now will grow as, you know, the Air Force expansion and just general expansion, I believe. So I'm glad you brought that up. We will end it right there. Okay, Senator Curt Voight, thanks again for coming on here. Yeah, appreciate it.